In the history of video games, there has never been a great horse game. Halfway decent titles, or even good titles, have managed to crash, break and stagger their way onto our PCs. We have played these old titles so many times we can probably quote them off by heart, because really, it's all we've got. And the reasons for this are numerous. For one, horses are difficult to animate well. Even during the horse game boom of the 2000s, making well-animated horses has always been a challenge. AAA companies spend thousands of dollars on mocapping horses to get them right. Secondly, any sort of mounted gameplay is notoriously difficult to develop, with horses remaining absent from mainstream gaming for years until games like Two Worlds and Oblivion made a proper attempt, and even then it was questionable quality. These technical challenges mean that horse games are expensive to make. Unlike, for example, cozy pixel games, they require technical skill and in-depth knowledge of development, making them not only risky as a product, but difficult to produce well. Furthermore, horse games are a niche market, meaning only a small group will be buying it, making the initial sales not always that enticing. And because companies believe that only girls like horses and girls don't play games, they end up focusing on the pink, fluffy, caring and cozy aspect instead of actually, making a good game. Because why bother if girls can't even play games, am I right? Due to all of these factors, large companies run away from the horse game genre at a breakneck speed, and the current risk-averse mindset of the industry simply leaves no space for it. So smaller companies who do not always have the budget, who don't have the know-how or skill, end up making horse games. Bad ones. And the genre keeps producing terrible titles that don't sell, not because the market isn't there, but because the market is tired of bad games. And so our chance at seeing a big budget, well-developed horse game is shrinking with each fresh failure. And then something happened. On the 28th of March 2025, a new game was announced, Equinox Homecoming. It was supposed to be the answer to our prayers. It ticked off all the boxes. MMORPG, open world, mystery-driven story, character creation, a decent budget of 7 million, a team of people who had worked on games like Helldivers, Age of Conan, World of Warcraft, and even the original Star Stable. To be honest, it sounded like a damn dream come true. A team of people who knew what they were doing, the possibility for horse games to be taken seriously? Sign me the fuck up. Then in June, we finally got a chance to play it. A release in early access, our chance to finally experience a game that was made by people who knew what it was fucking terrible. I can already hear that rallying cry of supporters. This game is in early access, you say? It is unfair to review it in its current state. Although yes, I do agree, the early access does leave room for leeway. It also falls away when they ask $25 for a product that is buggy, empty, broken mess at launch. But for the naysayers, I will try to be fair in this video. I will refrain from discussing bugs, glitches, or the barely formed skeleton it currently is. I will rather leave a more thorough analysis of the game once it is fully released, which should be next year. Because the problem with this game is not the bugs nor the current state of it. That is only the tip of the damned iceberg. The real problem lies with its tags. Multiplayer, cozy, horse game, and mystery are terms and keywords that have been slapped into every single article written about this game and beaten over our heads with a mallet. They are desperate to let you know that this is a horse game, and this is a cozy game, and above all, this is a game aimed at girls. We're not seeing innovation or inspiration, we're seeing good marketing. I'm getting ahead of myself. Throughout this video, I'm going to be looking into these tags, how they are defined, and how Equinox actually fits in. I'll be looking at certain features as we go on to ensure I cover as much as I can. This might seem odd to use tags as the jumping board for the review, or rather, overview, but I believe it is necessary to showcase the deeper problems. Because if the genre is so niche, why did anyone pump $7 million into a game about horses? And that's mostly the problem. Please remember to like and subscribe, and thank you to all my Ko-Fi supporters for just being awesome, and also to Peachy for making me cackle like a mad woman. She also made a video about this, so I'll leave a link down below, please go check it out. Let's get into it. So, first question. What is Equinox Homecoming? Equinox Homecoming is a horse game being developed by Blue Scarab Games. In the original press release, they stated, Equinox Homecoming is a new multiplayer online role-playing game that's a surprising and unique blend of cozy exploration and dark mystery. Perfect for fans of horses, murder mysteries, and relaxing story-rich gameplay. Players will saddle up and charge into an adventure together, where every trail leads to both wonder and intrigue, while uncovering an occult murder mystery. Every trail I followed in this game has led to exactly nowhere. Sorry. The story, in turn, is described as: your homecoming to Alderwood Island is anything but ordinary. A string of mysteries has set the entire island on edge. Your mother has vanished, suddenly, without a trace, and a body was discovered in the woods. Together with old and new friends, investigate these incidents and unearth a conspiracy nobody saw coming. The overall excitement in the horse game community was palpable for this game. Although it dropped suddenly, the graphics and promise of an in-depth story was a fresh take for us horse gamers. Yes, decent graphics and a half-decent story is a fresh take for horse gamers. We really don't have anything to look forward to, okay? Players were excited to see an original idea and something that appealed directly to them, that was even catering to them. And the developers were pretty damn self-aware of this. I quote, "We look into the kind of content that's popular among women," Colin Cragg, ex-Star Stable CEO and current CEO of Blue Scarab, explains. "Behind celebrity interviews, which don't translate particularly well to gaming, true crime and mystery is dominating the space ahead of almost any other subject matter." So, Equinox is a mystery, and according to Colin, not because they had an interesting mystery to tell, but because that is what is popular among female audiences. True crime is absolutely one of the leading interests of women in the internet, and steering clear of the term horror is probably a decent marketing move, as horror is not something women tend to gravitate towards. So, good marketing, but no inspiration. Meaning, they didn't start to create this game with an idea and then molded it to the audience. They rather considered the audience and then molded an idea that they think we would like handing women chocolate cake because women like chocolate. It's so cynical. They did, however, manage to translate the feeling of mystery and dread into the game. I will give them this. The music paints a heavy atmosphere, the wooded areas creating an eeriness, especially when the sun sets. The sound effects are crisp and the story pulls into the darker parts of mythology and mystery. And it's no surprise that the atmosphere is so well done. From an article from 6-1 Indie, Thomas Hutton Locher, the lead composer for Equinox, stated, "From the outset, the musical and sonic vision for Equinox Homecoming was guided by a desire to maintain a light, playful tone. Rather than relying on grandiose orchestral arrangement, the team opted for subtle electronic compositions, atmospheric, understated, and immersive. This approach was chosen deliberately to avoid overwhelming the player, instead offering semi-realistic ambiances and the effects paired with laid-back musical themes and dreamy yet memorable melodies." End quote. And I will say, this damn well works. The emotion and feeling is being masterfully done and presented. Sort of. Unfortunately, the visual breaks under scrutiny. Houses are clean and smooth, with perfect roofs, perfect doors, perfect spaces. Clean, pretty, and above all, dull. The world doesn't feel lived in, like a Truman Show nightmare, vacant and empty and sterile. Beyond its UI, the world feels like it had no art direction, only functional direction. "We need houses and we need roads" was more than likely the extent of the creative design. As a result, the town of Alderwood has no personality, only functionality. I won't remember this town. It feels like it wasn't thought through, like it was just sort of slapped there. There are no memorable places here. But it doesn't stop there. Horse models were allegedly bought, meaning this pretty thoroughbred is just an asset grabbed from a store along with the animations, and the Arabian horses were clearly Frankensteined into their form. Their necks broken, their noses punched in, and their backs bent and legs sawed short. I want to put this poor thing out of its misery. Couple this with the terrain that restricts you and the once beautiful world begins to buckle under scrutiny. It does not invite you to scrutinize. It begs you not to, because there's nothing for you to scrutinize. It's too bland to intrigue. Talking heads take up only a third of the screen, their faces awkwardly sitting beneath empty spaces and their name floating above their heads like a ghostly name tag. The best part of the visual is the guiding light. With winding roads and restrictive terrain, as I said, you cannot navigate the world without it. The roads love to curve and curl around the smallest of rocks, forcing you to ride around and around and around, extending the time you are in the game by possibly hours to make you think your hours per dollar is worth it. Hours per dollar denotes the time spent versus the price paid for the game. The more hours you get per dollar, the more value your game possibly has. The problem is this does not consider the quality of the game, only the length of it, which devalues the hours spent and makes the game more expensive. Like paying $100 on a bag of Cheetos the size of a car, or $100 on a prime steak. You're going to be spending a lot more time eating the Cheetos, but I'm gonna guess you're probably going to enjoy the prime steak more. It's artificial artificially inflating your hours. It certainly works in some ways, but it has the secondary negative effect of making me want to quit the game, cutting the hours I would have spent in the game by hours as well. So I guess it does balance out. But the visual guiding light, it works well and is about the only innovation that the developers managed to give us. Between Helldivers, Age of Conan and Blizzard, I honestly had expected more. It is truly a tragedy for the visual, as there are spaces that feel good. The lighthouse feels distant with a beautiful open field for galloping. The small town on the docks is pretty to walk around. The forest hums with atmosphere at night. These are swaths of brilliance in between the clutter, but it's not enough to hide the problems. But what about the mystery? How does it hold up? Not well, but this is by no means the fault of the writers. The article from the main quest says, since multiplayer online games tend to get updates and additions rather than being one-and-done products, I do assume that not all of the game's story will be released at once. Colin confirms this and explains that they think of the game's narrative like a TV serial, releasing an episode of content at a time and allowing the community to speculate and theorize in between, as is currently becoming more popular again in prestige television, as some networks recognize the benefit of ongoing engagement over binge watching. End quote. Basically, the writers cannot tell a good story because they have to keep the story going, so they will have to create what I call an artificial mystery. Artificial mysteries occur when the author wants to write a mystery, but the story is not complex or in-depth enough to carry one. They have no faith in their story, so they keep keywords and key information away from the reader or player, or they make characters deliberately stupid to ensure they take wrong paths or make wrong guesses. Or even if they do guess, the author has given too little information to have it be the definitive answer, even though it is the most logical one. A good example of this is in the morgue scene. We are, for some reason, given access to the morgue to look at Jenny's body. The magician tells us that the marks on the body don't look like any animal on the island. Intriguing. So what animal did kill her? Was it even an animal? So many questions. But to answer them, we need information. If the animal is unknown, what does it resemble? Is it a herbivore? A carnivore? Does it have a big jaw? How many teeth does it have? Are the teeth broken? Old? Are there any claw marks? How far apart? Can we estimate the size of the paw? They didn't answer any of these questions. It was simply an unknown animal, and there were quote-unquote different bite sizes. That is intriguing, but I want more information. And because the game doesn't give it to me, I disconnect. Because it's a brainless mystery. It's not asking you to think or consider. It's just giving you the information that it needs you to know for it to make sense later. This is how Equinox is going to extend the story into oblivion, by giving little bits of information here and there, but never quite committing to anything. By doing so, they can keep us on a line indefinitely, and that is exactly what they want to do. Because if they can do that, then they can indefinitely keep the game going. But this tactic of writing leaves the mystery feeling hollow and weak. Without anything concrete or solid for readers to chew on, they get bored and move on. Looking back at the example of Jenny's death, we come across another problem. Throughout the story, we are learning about a legend on the island, the Night Walker, a creature which possibly kills people in the forest. I say possibly because we're not sure. Not our character. She knows about the mythology. We, as in the players, don't know anything about the myth. Our character does know about this myth, but we're not allowed to know about the myth until she thinks it's okay for us to know about it. Or rather, until the writer thinks it's time for us to know. We're not allowed to ask questions, we should just accept. That is not how stories are told. If the characters know something about this mythology, then let us in on the story. Give us something to chew on. Artificial mysteries actively hurt your player engagement, but much like the restrictive terrain keeps you on the roads to extend your game time, so too does the story restrict your knowledge to extend the story. That is not to say there is nothing intriguing here. There are some elements that do tickle the interest. In one quest, you are helping a forest ranger who does not wear socks find out why animals are getting sick. He thinks it's rabies. I think he's blind. The stag has extra teeth growing out of its jaw. That is not how rabies works, my dude. Call in the CDC, the National Guard. Fucking drop in NATO. You got a predator deer stalking you. Why is this guy calling it rabies? Because the writer and the 3D artist did not communicate that's really it. The 3D artist possibly took some liberties and made a deer with teeth. It's fucking sick and I love it. Problem is, no one in this cutscene actually mentions the fangs, which just disconnects me from the story further because nothing on the screen matters. But anyway, you are tasked with putting down some oral rabies vaccine bait. While doing so, you come across an infected deer. You follow it, and the deer eats a rabbit. That is a horrifying concept. truly disturbing. Brilliant in showing how this disease is affecting animals, turning herbivores into carnivores. That's fucking amazing. I would have loved to have fucking seen it. Most of the cutscenes are placeholders. Now, this is fine, this is early access, but this is also an example of how your great ideas can be ruined if you rushed out your game. This image is wild, it's brilliant, grotesque, and completely ruined because I read it on a cue card instead of seeing it. The surprise is gone, the shock is gone into the ether. I will never have the moment of being surprised by a deer eating a rabbit ever again because I technically already saw it. What a damn disappointment. But this brings up another problem, the maturity of the story. Throughout the dialogue, your character will occasionally drop an F-bomb or mention drinking. There's even a discussion about suicide, which is cured by a horse race. Okay, I'm being facetious, but I really do wish that stories will stop making attempted suicide so easy to just drop. It's a terrifying experience to go through, and it's always nice to have someone with you afterwards, but it's not something you get over on a night, buddy. That's why you have Suicide Watch. But the point is that drinking, swearing, and sex does not make for a mature story. A mature story is one that respects the audience's intelligence. The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents is a brilliant example of this. Written by Sir Terry Pratchett, the book tells of a piper and his talking rats who scam towns out of their money by pretending there is a plague of rats. The story is pretty simple, but it gets dark, with rat kings, murder, and twisted mysteries coiled beneath the surface. Secret of Nim is another such example. In neither of these stories is the focus on swearing, drinking, or sex. They are stories told about heavy subjects. One considers the question of faith, the other science, and how we must be responsible for what we do with knowledge. It is not the content of a story that makes it mature, but rather its themes. If the themes discussed are meant for an older audience or a younger one. And yes, both these stories are children's stories. Equinox is just a very simple mystery with nothing to it beyond some really interesting imagery, which I can't see, just absolutely brilliant. And this is a sign of the writers not understanding what makes a story mature. It is not the word fuck or blood or gore, but rather, what is the story trying to convey? But even if it was trying to convey a good story, that story is completely ruined by the next tag: multiplayer. To be a multiplayer game is almost a must for many game companies today. It's how Equinox got its $7 million of funding to begin with. NetEase Incorporated and Behold Ventures, who supported this company, are live service focused, as we can see by the games that they have supported, meaning multiplayer is the way to go, especially if Equinox wants to validate that $7 million. But with that being said, calling yourself an MMO and being an MMO are two very different things. Equinox is a multiplayer in the absolute loosest sense of the word. We can interact with other players, we can see them, and there is this big world, so technically it's a multiplayer. But does the game warrant the title? Are the interactions with other players meaningful? Is it better as a multiplayer? Would we lose anything if it was a single player? The answer to all those questions is an emphatic no. There are no group quests or interesting gameplay elements that can only be done alongside other players. I can play this game 100% solo and won't miss out on anything. This is a problem with horse games in general. Star Stable, Star Equestrian, and My Riding Tales have very little reason to be MMO other than I can see my friends. It is the absolute bare minimum to be called a multiplayer. Yay. As for the experience, well, let's take a look at the setting to see if it works in the experience. Multiplayer games often think up interesting backstories or ideas to make the world at least make sense to an extent. In DC Universe Online, for example, Brainiac has turned thousands of people into superheroes through a new technology. You're playing as one of these new heroes or villains. In World of Warcraft, any race you choose will have a specific quest line catered to you. You start small and then build your way up, making you feel like you're just sort of part of the tribe, at least at the start. These settings don't always hold up to scrutiny, especially later on, but they are an attempt to make the world make sense. Even Star Stable starts you out as a new rider at Moorland. It doesn't last and makes no sense later down the line, but for a start, you're just another rider joining all the other riders or players on the Isle of Jorvik for the summer. And if you see other riders, you can sort of convince yourself that, they're just other summer riders and they're not having the great adventure you're having. So, what about Equinox? When you create your character, you can choose a name, but everyone calls you Alex because you play Alex. That is who the story is about. And I'm left asking, why isn't this a single-player game? This type of narrative clearly is seen in other single-player games. Shepard, Inquisitor, Geralt, Batman, Desarday, Master Chief, Lara Croft, and most games where you play as a named protagonist are single-player games. Because that helps you immerse into the story. MMOs usually steer clear of named characters because you're not just one person going on an adventure, you're one of many. So right out of the gate, Equinox feels like two different experiences being mashed into one, the story and the multiplayer. And just, why give me the option to name my character if I'm just going to be called something else? It feels like the single player is either tacked on or the multiplayer is tacked on. Something has been tacked on. But the problem extends into the world. We see other players running around our home, which is supposed to be, abandoned, or around the crime scene, no police officers keeping an eye. This is supposed to be a story-driven game, yet I find myself constantly yanked out of the story by people running by and ruining the experience. It becomes worse when you realize they're all dressed like you, and all of them are called Alex, and all of them are missing their mums. Alexwood is indeed a strange place, but finally, what do we lose? Absolutely nothing. In fact, if the game was single player, we would gain a lot by having a better story. A story that doesn't need to be held back to sell seasons. I want to make it clear that making a horse game MMO is not the problem, but making this one is, because it is so heavily focused on a single player experience. An example of an MMO horse game done well is Alicia Online. Racing is brilliant for MMO, and switching out cars for horses works well. The fundamental idea of the game is designed to be an MMO. Equinox is designed to be a single player. Furthermore, this is a small team with a AA budget. Wasting so much money on the MMO aspect actively hurt the development of this game, I can bet you this, because time was taken away from the gameplay and the world to be funneled into creating an MMO experience. For comparison, the first Senua's Sacrifice was made by a team of 20 people for $8 million. You can make great, stunning games if you are willing to work within the confines of your budget. This is just made worse when we can so clearly see the game's premise and concept was more than likely originally a single player experience. And what an experience that would have been. So why an MMO? Because that is what the investors wanted, plain and simple. NetEase Incorporated and Behold Ventures are focused on live service experiences, so when they invested money into this project, they had no intention of supporting something innovative for players. They wanted to make a lot of money. And so we have MMO tacked onto a single player game. But now they're trying to slap on another tag that makes absolutely no damned sense. Cozy. Outside of the core areas that we're creating for the narrative, we've also spent a fair amount of time on the pipeline to create new areas for writing and exploration. It's incredibly difficult and time-consuming to create base narrative gameplay areas because there needs to be something new to see or interact with every few seconds. But if the intention is just going for a nice scenic ride where you have this cozy social experience instead, we can deliver that in parallel. Just ignore all the blood. Cozy games have boomed tremendously, especially after the pandemic, and games like Ranch of Rivershine capitalized on this quite well. Unfortunately, cozy has become synonymous with boring. The genre is in a bit of a crisis, with Tales of the Shire an epic example of how the genre has become more of a cash cow instead of a space for innovation and good games. Tales of the Shire became a tick-the-box situation, an example of where developers decided that a cozy game needs fishing, cooking, decorating, talking, farming, and cutie graphics. But it never stopped to consider why these elements need to be there, or how to innovate them in a way that doesn't just make people want to play Stardew Valley again. Basically, they added what other cozy games had, but never stopped to ask, what makes a good cozy game? And to be fair, this is a difficult thing to answer. However, a user from the Cozy Gamers Reddit described it quite aptly, I feel. A cozy game has an aesthetic, narrative or gameplay element that evokes a sense of home or comfort in the player. End quote. They make the point that on the other extreme of this emotion is horror. Horror is also defined by a feeling, not necessarily the gameplay elements. With this in mind, we can now look at Equinox. Does it evoke a feeling for cozy? The world has realistic graphics, the music is dark and foreboding, your friend was killed and torn apart by a mysterious animal on the island, there is blood on the road. You can actually see where she was dragged, so I'm not sensing cozy here. The gameplay consists of riding from point A to point B constantly, with nothing in between other than picking up berries, flowers, and the occasional horseshoe. I just want to add in here that the distances they put in between the quests are absolutely ridiculous. I had one quest where I had to run from the one side of the map all the way to the other, and then back again to complete it. That was the quest. I ran from one point, got 5 lines of dialogue, and ran all the way back. At one point I just refused to play further because it was just so extremely mind-numbing to do. This decision, to be fair, was made easier when the game decided to stop working after the last update. I have not had any sort of wish to reinstall it. But the reason for this boring gameplay is either because the game is in a state of early development, they haven't added anything to make the game interesting, or because this is the gameplay loop they want to sell us. And I think it's the latter. As they said in the main quest article, if the intention is just going for a nice scenic ride where you have this cozy social experience instead, we can deliver that in parallel. End quote. So, they think backtracking is cozy. I'm here to tell you, it's not. It's backtracking. You can at the very least, though, take care of your horse, but it's clunky and buggy. You also have to log in every day to take care of it, otherwise the care meters go down, placing pressure on you to log in every day. I understand why people call this Star Stable 2.0. The races, in turn, are long, winding roads that stretch on, and the jumping is at least quite fun. The idea of hitting space at the correct time is the most satisfying this gameplay gets, but it is too little to truly keep the players in that loop of gameplay, plus it was stolen from Star Equestrian, so no innovation there. The movement of the horse is also clunky and difficult, making it a chore to ride, not inviting to explore, because you keep getting stuck on terrain or your horse keeps stopping for the smallest of pebbles, so you're not exactly, motivated to explore, even though that is part of what they say. Come and explore by staying on the road and never deviating the path. Anyway, but above all of this, any game, no matter its genre, must have flow, which is something Equinox struggles with, partly due to visual glitches and mostly to do with the horses feeling heavy. It just doesn't have that smooth transition from one point to another that makes me want to stay in the game. In comparison, we can look at the Ranch of Rivershine. Just the carrying system will do. Keep in mind, this was developed by one person before you shit yourself and say, oh, but this game it's not an early access. Yeah, it was an early access for, I think, almost 2 years. And even in that 2 years, it still had a very decent carrying system. But I will let these two run side by side to show you how good the flow in Ranch of Rivershine is and how bad it is in Equinox. So, overall, Equinox is not exactly screaming cozy, but let's see what the players from the Cozy Gamer Reddit has to say about this game. And the first one says, don't get it. This game was built on a terrible and inconsistent foundation and it shows. It's an insult to call this game early access. And the next one says, dunno, grind. You have weekly quests, but they are all go do X races and go gather Y, talk to Z and do this thing. There's also no proper teleporter. You can teleport to the starter area, literally south of the map, or the barn, middle of nowhere, but kind of close to the town. If you're in town and you have to go to the bottom right corner, you have to ride there. No teleporter for some boring grind quest. Sucks to be you. End quote. This is something else that has concerned me from the start of development. If we look at the description for this game, it is essentially everything you can do now, which is ride, do some quests, do races, feed your horse, explore, and pick flowers. There is precious little else to do. And the game developers don't seem to be promising more, except for the story. There doesn't seem to be any bigger idea or grander plan. This is what they wanted to give us. This. Which makes it feel like they're bargaining on long-term investment so that they can figure out what the game was supposed to be eventually. Although there are some positive comments from the Cozy Game Reddit, and I quote, the positives are that the horse riding is lovely and the world is pretty. They're not really HD AAA graphics. It's cute. It feels like they put a lot of effort into the appearance of buildings and your horse and not much into the NPCs. End quote. But, to be clear and to get back on track, no one is really saying the game is cozy. So why use the cozy tag if the game isn't cozy? On the other extreme of true crime, women also love cute cozy games. The atmosphere and calming experience is something anyone can appreciate while listening to people getting murdered. The point is, having the tag mystery alongside cozy is the ideal way to rake in as many female players as possible. And isn't that just depressing? Do I sound cynical? Perhaps overly so. Perhaps you feel that I'm being unfair, that it is quite possible that the developers developed a game from the ground up to say something, not just to capitalize on an untapped market. Unfortunately, they know what they're doing. And I quote, Equinox Homecoming deliberately aims for the female demographic with its cozy horse vibes. The appeal for your game doesn't have to be why are they going to play your game over the other 55 titles that are extremely similar that are coming out, and oh well, our guns are the coolest. Oh my god, you're ignoring 52% of the world population. That means that some features are being developed even more thoughtfully than normal, such as providing a wide array of makeup options. Here's a thought. Did you ever think of just making a good game with horses? That actually would have been a lot better than the crap that you're spewing now. Because this is coming across as so pretentiously condescending. Oh girls, look, we're doing you a favor. I hope you enjoy the pretty little ponies. Anyway, it continues. A lot of horse and cozy games end up feeling juvenile and immature, Ashley adds. It drives me crazy. We didn't want to shy away from more mature story elements, but your character is never in any danger. End quote. Yes, because girls just can't stand danger. We're too scared of that. We're too scared. Like, I know, I understand. I'm being very sarcastic and I'm being very mean, but this drives me insane. It is so stupid. Just make a good game. Don't focus it on women. Don't focus it on, oh, women like makeup. Don't do that. Just focus on good gameplay. You say you want to take your audience seriously, but you don't want to make engaging gameplay. I feel like I'm going insane. Cozy games did fine without focusing on makeup. They did brilliantly when the genre was being taken seriously and not seen as another cash cow to milk for your bursting pockets. So Equinox Homecoming, according to their own words, is not an inspiration from a developer with a vision or a person who used to play horse games and wants to give us something better. It is the cynical eye of a CEO who noticed a gap in the market and wants to make money. That's it. And this is why Equinox Homecoming is completely, utterly broken from the ground up. Because it is built on cynicism, and it leaks out of every damn pore. So the final question and the final tag is it a horse game? Absolutely yes. And that is precisely the problem. It is not a game, it's an activity, an emphasis placed on animations instead of gameplay, treating its audience like idiots, and believing girls like makeup makes this not only a horse game but a prime example of one. They spent a huge chunk of their budget in a barn in Canada mocapping horses instead of making a game. They are making a girl game with horses, not trying to convey the experience of actually riding a horse. Let me mention Shadow of the Colossus in yet another video. In preparing for the development of Shadow of the Colossus, the developers went to a training camp at Mount Fuji to ride horses. They took the time to observe the horses, study their movements, and then in the game try to convey that feeling to the player. Agro, your mount does not always listen. She doesn't always do as asked. Her movement is not trying to be perfect, but instead tries to convey a feeling. Instead of capturing the perfect horse movement and animation, which they couldn't do back then, artists instead ask themselves, what do I feel when riding? And that is what they put in. A lot of games do this because gameplay is the translation of experience. When driving cars in Need for Speed, they don't always accelerate realistically, they don't always turn the way they should, not because the developers can't do realism, but because they are trying to convey you a feeling. They're trying to give you the feeling of racing a car. And to do that, you have to get creative. You have to test, feel, retest, and refeel until you capture the movement or flow that you're looking for. For example, in the Arkham series, I feel like Batman because years was spent refining this motion and movement until they could hand it to you and say, you're going to be Batman for 8+ hours. I also want to point out that Blue Scarab Entertainment was established in 2020. So they had at least around 4 to 5 years to develop this game, and we still have a horse game where the horse moves like a bus. Equinox devs are not trying to convey, they are trying to tick a box. They spend their times in interviews talking about the genre they are making the game for instead of telling us why they specifically were inspired to tell the story. The fact that they say that the only reason they're making this game is because there's a gap in the market tells me that they have no inspiration for making a good game. They're just trying to fill a gap in the market, which is a problem. Caring is another thing in the game. It's not something you do because you enjoy it, but because the game tells you you must do it or else the care meters go down. They have no gameplay, only long winding roads to keep you in the line game longer, and on top of all of that, if you remove the horses from this game entirely, it would not change the story. You can replace them with bicycles, and the story would not change. The developers are promising to reveal why horses are so integral to the island, but it feels like they're playing catch up with player demands, like adding environmental jumping to appease players, and now your horse can get stuck on the choppy terrain. These are details and ideas that should have been ironed out by now, but I guess if your budget is running low and you spend too much money trying to make your horse look pretty instead of making a good game, then rushing your product out is probably the best way to save it. But Equinox is a horse game like Tales of Shire is a cozy game, cobbled together tags and concepts without ever considering why they work. It has nothing new to offer apart from a half-interesting mystery. It has created nothing new apart from mashing two genres together and not doing a good job of it. It has sadly a good idea for a story which is being drowned out by multiplayer. By the definition of horse games, it is most certainly a horse game, because only a horse game can be this poorly made. That was very heated, and I do apologize if it comes across as a bit aggressive, but I am very angry about this game, because it is such a cynical, awful thing to create. I want to mention something Abigail Pinehaven once said to me regarding early access. You only get one chance to make a first impression. Whenever you launch a game on Steam and it's broken, dull, boring mess, that's the impression that is going to stick. I once said a long time ago in a podcast that you won't always remember how a game plays, but you will always remember how it made you feel. And right now this game makes me feel mindlessly bored. Tagging it with cozy and mystery is a coat of paint over a cracking wall. It can't save the structure. I'm tired of people telling me it will get better, or it's still in development, Rattle. Oh my god, stop being such a hater. I'm tired of hanging on to hope, of closing my eyes to all the issues and telling myself it will get better. Chances are it won't. As Peachy mentioned in her video, only 25% of games in early access managed to become a success. Equinox had a terrible launch, and the only reason people are pretending it didn't is because we're desperate for a horse game, and the devs know it. We are so desperate that we are willing to forgive broken games and terrible practices, because I'm gonna tell this to you straight, this company is raring to go for our pockets. They have put together all the correct tags, and now they're expecting you to pay. Calling new breeds DLC is a joke. That is what we call microtransactions. That is what we call the new breeds in Star Stable Online, and that is what a microtransaction is. Small, repeatable purchases. But they are actively avoiding keywords like live service, which the game is, and microtransaction, which they are admitting to because they know it's going to give them bad PR. And they're leaning into others, cozy, mystery, MMO, even when it doesn't fit, to paint a very specific picture of the game they are trying to sell you. It's a calculation, not an inspiration. Now, some players have taken to calling Equinox the new SSO. I actually completely agree. It is a lot like SSO in that it's not a game so much as an activity. The focus on money instead of a good story, the focus on marketing instead of development, all certainly align with SSO. But I will say, at the very least, SSO is doing a shit ton better than they used to. So I will give them that. I said at the start of the video that there has never been a great horse game. And it's still true. But with Equinox, we're in an even worse position than we were before. Because now, when companies turn their attention to our genre, they will see the terrible launch of Equinox, the player base dying off, the poor reception, and the dying game, and they will think, again, that this is simply not worth it. Well done, Equinox. You screwed over the horse gaming genre. I hope you're proud.
You fucked it up!